So a little bit about me. Even though Dawn did an amazing job of introducing me, thank you so much again. I do want to share a little bit about why I'm so passionate about this topic. I am the talent strategist and founder of Chief Learning Office. And as Dawn had mentioned, I've spent 20 years in this industry. And here's what I've learned. Leadership can make or break any organization, whether it's an amazing volunteer organization like we have with Toastmasters, or if it's in the government, or it's in your typical corporate setting, from big companies to small companies. I have seen leadership be the strength or the deal breaker of companies. And so what I find is that leadership isn't something that you're necessarily just assigned a title with. You may be charged with formal authority that makes you a leader, but leadership is everywhere. It's rampant, it's ripe, and it's there for us to go in and help grow and expand the opportunities that are there. And what I find is that oftentimes people kind of hold back their natural leadership skills and abilities, or we look around the room and we sort of say, you know, Dawn, natural leader, let's reach out to Dawn and let's grow those skills. But I'm of the mindset that really everyone is a leader. And I'm also a big proponent of the idea of shared leadership, which means that at any given time, if you have the talents and abilities that that moment is calling for, then it is your opportunity and in fact your obligation to step up and be the leader in that moment. One of my favorite quotes is from a cartoon. I don't know if any of you are familiar with, it was called Robots. And in this, basically there is a master inventor, and his favorite quote was, see a need, fill a need. And what that means is we want to really surround ourselves with leaders who, when the time is right, they step up and step in with those amazing skills and really fulfill that need, because no one person can be the leader for every opportunity. So I'd love to start us off with a question. And to do this, prepare to unmute yourselves. I know everyone gets a little nervous online if everyone unmutes at the same time, but I want you to unmute yourself and just sort of chime in. And what I found is we'll sort of figure out what our pecking order is. And I want to hear from a few of you. What was it that made you a leader? Now, if you see yourself as a leader, that's an easy question to answer. If you don't see yourself as a leader, I want you to really put on that lens and think of times where you stepped up and you led the charge. So go ahead and someone just kind of chime in there, and I promise that even if we talk over each other, we'll sort of sort it out. Who'd like to?
This is Deborah Morrissey. My ability to say yes when they were looking for somebody to do something, and I just said yes. And as a result, I've had a wonderful career. I've had a wonderful time with Toastmasters. It's been great.
I love that, Deborah. Absolutely. Like, be that person. If not you, then who? And if not you, then nobody. Fabulous. And Annetta, I saw your hand go up as well.
Kind of like Deborah's, but I'm going to say when I solved a problem or answered a itching question in the chaos. There was chaos and I answered the question, and then there were people following. That's when I knew I was a leader.
That's lovely. And you know, what that really speaks to is that see a need, fill a need moment, where you have knowledge, experience, wisdom, that if you share that, you are that leader. In that moment, your voice is the voice that really needs to be heard. So I love that you answered that call.
I'm a natural born leader.
Nice. And Desiree, can you expand on me on how does that show up for you?
It shows up when unexpectedly. Since a child in child school, when the teacher needed help, or when, assembling in lines, I would just take it upon myself, like, let's get together. on into high school, when I saw that there was a need for something, I opened up a chess club. Going into the military, I was just selected to be the leader. Into like the job force, where I'm taking initiative here in Toastmasters. It just comes natural, and I have a sense of ability of communicating, listening to everybody's language, understanding and seeing aspects from all perspectives.
Well, Desiree, first and foremost, thank you so much for your service.
Oh.
As the mother of a daughter who's preparing to go into the Air Force, your service holds a particular place in my heart. Secondly, I absolutely love how you led with the comment, I am a natural born leader. I absolutely love hearing that. And can I just say from one woman to another that I think too often we have such strength in leadership as women, and yet we are sort of taught, that's not the subject of this speech, but
right.
To tamp that down and sort of be a little apologetic about it. Absolutely nothing against men who speak up and speak out as leaders. I love and respect that as well, but I love that you are a great light in showing that female leadership is just as powerful and just as important. And so thank you for leading that charge.
Absolutely.
As well.
You're welcome. And I was in the Air Force, so
yeah.
Good choice for your daughter. Yes, great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay,
I'll let her know.
Okay, I'll be muting.
Great. Any final thoughts?
I would say when you become a resource, I've become a resource for people, and then they seek me out to find information that they need, and they know that they can reach out to me for that information.
Well, if it isn't one of my favorite people in the world, Kelly Lawson. Yes, and Kelly, I have had the distinct pleasure of being able to work with you directly. And indeed, you are absolutely hands down one of those people that is incredibly responsive, that people know they can rely on you, and you are just so people first in all of your thoughts and deeds, which I think is just an incredibly lovely form of leadership. So thank you, and thanks for joining. Hi, Kelly. So let's talk a little bit about why we would want to foster leadership. We've probably all heard the old adage, there's no I in team, and it's important that we recognize that we, even if we are leaders, can't be all things to all people at all times. With many years of conflict resolution, one of the areas I see this most commonly is in this area where you have some kind of dispute that's happening between two people. One person goes to the leader and says, I'm unhappy, there's this conflict that exists, and suddenly the leader's supposed to magically know how to fix that problem. It also occurs when, someone is struggling with a problem at work, and who do we turn to? We turn to the boss, right? We turn to the leader. We're always sort of like turning around and saying and thinking, okay, they're the person that has to have the answer, right? Because they're in charge. When in fact, what we'll find is a shared leadership or a team leadership is the most important path forward. And it always provides each of us with a network of support, very much where we heard earlier from Annetta, where when you are that voice that has that expertise, you can step up and step in and really be the person to help and share your talents at that time. So what we found is that companies that foster this culture of leadership set the tone for positive and empowering work environment. And everyone has to really drive and be on board with the idea that leadership is everywhere. We're going to talk later a little bit about how sometimes we might have preconceived ideas of what leadership can look like or who's supposed to be the leader. And I'd really ask that for our purposes today, you break through any stereotypes or preconceived ideas that you may have around leadership so that we can really foster, grow, and nurture the leadership that is everywhere around us. So I will say I'm a very practical girl at heart. I love tools, tips, and techniques that once we leave our time together today, you can start to really practice and apply the information that we talk about today. So in keeping with that philosophy, I have 6 actions that can be purposefully applied in order to create leaders. So we're going to introduce them now, and then we're going to spend a little bit of time for the rest of our time together, really exploring and talking through what this looks like. I also would love to encourage you to, if you have any questions, to either unmute yourself and sort of chime in there. Again, I'm Irish, so this will just feel like dinner at our house. I will not be offended at all. Don't feel like you need to save your questions or comments to the end. I'd love for this to be an engaging and interactive conversation. Or if you would feel more comfortable throwing your questions into the chat, I'll keep an eye out for that and happily respond to that as well. Whatever makes you feel most comfortable. I just want this to feel like an engaging and participative environment for you. So on to our 6 actions that we can do. The first one that we have is to build the right environment. If you've ever gone to a play, then you know that the stage that is set, it sets the tone for everything that you do. So we want to really set a rich and nourishing environment to really grow and foster that leadership that we're looking for in others. We also want to recognize wins. So I'm going to share something that I found myself saying a lot lately. I'm not nice. Now, I know we don't know each other, at least many of us don't know each other. So you could say, oh, really? Well, that's kind of a strange thing to lead with. But the comment I get all of the time is, Nancy, you're so nice. You're just such a nice person. And I consistently find myself saying, you know what, I'm really not nice, but I am very honest. And I think the thing that I'm honest about that people interpret as kindness is I recognize when you're amazing at something. Why do we only seem to be willing to recognize either like the super big wins or mostly the things that we lose? Like, gee, you could have done that better, or why did we do that? If you are awesome, I'm going to tell you you're awesome. It doesn't make me nice, it makes me honest. So we're going to talk about how we can recognize those wins, bring those to the front, and really celebrate those successes, because as I'm really fond of saying, this costs you nothing. I love that Toastmasters is all about that positive affirmation and really reinforcing what we do well. If there is one, if I had to pick only one thing that we could pick from Toastmasters and sort of disperse out into the world at large, it would be that. We create such an incredible environment of positive psychological safety. It is a place that allows each of us to grow. So let's just keep doing that and realize how important it is, not only within the Toastmaster setting, but outside of it as well. The third thing that I'm going to encourage us to do is give feed forward. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that is, because most of us would think feed forward, what is that? I'm used to feedback, right? So we're going to check into a different way of breaking through the stereotypes of how we engage and interact with one another using the technique of feeding forward. In fact, it was a post that I had put out on LinkedIn sharing the concept of feed forward. Now, I'm not the inventor of this by any stretch of the imagination. I give full credit to Gordon Marshall and then Joe Hirsch, whose book we'll quote later. But Dawn saw that post on LinkedIn, reached out to me and said, Nancy, I'm really I find this message of feed forward compelling. And I think you should come and speak at our Leadership Expo, and you should talk about this topic. So we're going to spend some time doing that. Dawn, tip of the hat to you, madam, and thank you for suggesting it. I'm so excited that you did. Number 4, be a mentor. So I think sometimes we think of mentorship as sort of this like learning at your father's knee kind of thing, or, you know, learning from your grandparents and the wisdom that they impart. And that is absolutely true. But mentorship can have a lot of different perspectives and dynamics to it. We're going to dig into that a little bit more and talk about what being a mentor really means and how learning and growing and really thriving can look like a lot of different ways, and we can depend on one another for those opportunities. Number 5, invest in them. I think oftentimes as leaders, we are tempted to lean most heavily on our superstars, right? Like the people who already have it down. They know what they're doing, they're experts at what they do. And we time and time and time again reach back into that pool of expertise. Well, that's great that those superstars are dependable and you have them. But what we need to be thinking of is how we're investing in the next generation of talent, how we're growing and coaching and expanding on, the talent and the superstars of the future, even if it looks like a very specific talent that they're bringing to the table. I think, and I say, leave no stone unturned. Like, let's really invest in the talent pool that's around us. And finally, ask questions. Now, we are going to, yes, Kay, I actually have thank you. Kay has asked me to put the name and author in the chat. And Kay, I'll let you know that that is actually part of my presentation. So it's there for you, ma'am. You'll see it in just a few moments. And finally, ask questions, just like Kay did. Thank you, by the way, for that question. We have to acknowledge that as leaders, we have to move past the idea that we ourselves are all things to all people at all times. It is the rookie mistake that I see freshly, newly promoted leaders make all of the time, that they have to have all the answers, have all the information, never admit that they don't know or they don't actually know exactly what they should be doing. It's okay to be human. It's okay to be vulnerable. The best leaders are. And by role modeling and exampling our willingness to reach out, ask questions, look for other sources of support and resources and grow our skills and abilities, that makes us a great role model. It helps foster leaders and shows other people that we don't have to have all the answers, but we can still be amazing leaders. So let's get into some of these details, shall we? We're going to start with building the environment. So obviously, no one is a fan of negative work environments. I mean, after all, who really wants to go in every day dreading the work ahead of us? So if you want to foster leadership in the workplace and you want to create that positive and productive work environment, you really have to be the example and the role model. Positive workplaces not only give your company and your team that boost of morale, but it also helps sort of like spread and sow the environment that you want other people to grow and model as well. In order to have a positive work environment, you really want to listen closely to the people that you're working with. Keep in mind that your style of communication may not necessarily be someone else's style. I was speaking with someone the other day who said, in my performance review, it came up that I'm too direct, that I have a direct communication style. And she said, I don't really feel like that's a fair thing to say on my performance review. Like, after all, that is my communication style, and being direct is not necessarily a bad thing, even if people aren't always speaking with the same communication style themselves. And that really resonated with me, that I think oftentimes we have to be comfortable listening to the message that's being sent instead of necessarily the style in which it's being presented. Yes, it's true that this woman is very direct, but I think her real strength and her real talent that was sort of being overlooked and overshadowed by this comment of being too direct is that she has a very high gift of discernment. She can look at a situation, she can identify how it could be done better, she can notice things that really could improve, streamline, make us more effective and efficient. And because we were too busy maybe being distracted by the directness of her message and feeling, and I didn't speak to the people who gave her this feedback, but I've had a lot of years doing this, and I can tell you exactly what's going on. They interpreted her feedback and the information that she was sharing as criticism. Right? So you don't like what we're doing. You don't like who we are. You don't think we're doing things well enough. So they weren't really listening to what she was saying. Instead, they were kind of putting up this defensive front that did not allow her message to get through. And moreover, I would welcome directness if I were a business owner who needed to really know how I could do better and serve our clients better and be more responsive to my team. I would welcome and want someone to be direct with me so I don't have to wonder what they're talking about at the water cooler about me. So yes, let's listen. Also, instead of diminishing the contributions that are being made, let's encourage them. Like, catch someone being good, right? If you have kids, you've probably heard that expression, catch them being good. Like, really nurture the behaviors that you want and allow those to flourish. So the club that I am very honored to be a member of is Minetta Voices. And we are a fairly new club, and we've had some young talent come and join us. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I love to do is find someone that, like, there's one guy in particular I can think of. He's a really good evaluator and a natural, right? You've seen it. So I went up to him and he was a little more quiet and shy. And I said, you know, you are incredibly good as an evaluator. Yeah. You have the ability to listen and really find the things that are going to help that speaker elevate their speech to the next level. It was powerful, and he didn't really even see that in himself. And so I'm very proud to say that he actually went on and started competing at club contests and has done quite well. And so those talents are flourishing. Now let me tell you, acknowledging that someone did a good job is not a skill unique to me. We've all done that. We've all seen great talent at the clubs, and we encourage that. So that's one of the things that, you know, makes this gentleman a great leader and an example of how to find the courage to be an evaluator, which sometimes is the biggest hurdle to overcome. And finally, delegate. So as leaders, it can be tricky because we love things to be done well. We love things to be done effectively. We, you know, shall we say, like to control the situation. And I get it. I totally get it. I'm there with you. I love a wonderful result. But keep in mind that until you test a muscle, until you really like stress that muscle, it cannot grow. It will not get stronger. And you cannot just delegate to the people who are already capable of doing the job. We have to sort of stretch and grow by turning that work over to people who haven't necessarily strengthened those muscles yet. And yes, we have to be willing to risk failure. I have a small story that I'll share. There was once a vice president of an organization that invested $250,000 into a project that he really believed in. He was the key stakeholder, he was the ambassador and the advocate, and he went to the company, sold them in on this idea. The whole project went down in flames. I mean, just everything that could go wrong went wrong. So this vice president was called into the president's office, and he was truly prepared to be fired. He walked into the president's office, sat down, waiting for the inevitable news of, pack your bags and here's Bob from security. And instead, the president said to him, "What have you learned from this experience?" And the vice president shared his lessons learned. And the president said, I agree with what you've shared. I think that's really helpful. Thanks, and I'll see you tomorrow. And the vice president sat back and said, "Wait, you're not going to fire me?" He said, "You've got to be kidding. I just invested $250,000 in your coaching and development. I'm surely not going to fire you now." So keep in mind that that risk that we take through delegation actually allows us to grow talent, even if the lessons learned aren't the ones that we hoped. As I mentioned earlier, I am a huge fan and proponent of recognizing wins. We don't take enough time to really celebrate success. And I love this quote by Julian Hall that says, "If you don't celebrate success, it won't celebrate you." That is so true. We need to take that moment to notice, to appreciate, and to celebrate those wins. And wins can look like small things, like someone who got up and gave a speech for the first time at a club contest, which is, I'm sorry, but that is pressure. I know we're warm and supportive and we clap and we give psychological safety and yes to all those things, but it is still daunting to sort of put yourself up there and risk what that's going to look like in a club contest. And so I really think that win or no win, it's all about like that growth. It's about that stretch opportunity, and it's about noticing that in others. By the way, I do want to give a little bit of a practical tip on celebrating success. While there are some people that absolutely love the spotlight and feel like that's amazing and it feels warm and like, you know, turkey on Thanksgiving Day, there are other people that might be more shy about the spotlight. And so try to kind of tune into that. A quiet word of praise, a small note written on a piece of paper, something that like shows that you notice and you appreciate can be just as impactful. But if you have someone that's a little more shy, quiet, or introverted, shining the spotlight in a very public setting could actually backfire a little bit. So do try to read your audience and be sensitive to how they want to receive that acknowledgement. But once you have that, be generous. I mean, like apply liberally. Make sure that you are giving everyone the warmth and the acknowledgement, and notice their amazing talents because they're everywhere. And that is how we strengthen the muscle. Like, you like that? I didn't know. I'm gonna sit a little taller and speak a little louder and recognize that even though I may never have seen myself as a leader, I rock at that. It's a different kind of confidence. So as promised, I want to talk a little bit about feed forward. So we're all familiar with the idea of feedback. Now, Gordon Marshall is actually he is a former CEO and a coach and author who really designed the whole idea of feed forward versus feedback. But Joe Hirsch, and I had promised Kay earlier that I would provide the title and the author. Joe Hirsch is the author of The Feedback Fix. And I will say that this information is so important. I think when we talk about feedback, we are in fact looking at the past. And Joe would say, dump the past, embrace the future, and lead the way to change. And boy, oh boy, I could not agree more. So let's look a little bit at what feedback compared to feed forward could look like. So I'm not necessarily going to read the screen to you. And Dawn, I'd be happy to also provide the slides of this afterwards if you're interested in sharing them out. So feedback, we're going to start to get the nature of it, right? It's going to take things that we already know. It's going to be more problem focused instead of solution focused. It's going to throw a lot of measurements and scores at you. It also is not really clear. I am a big fan of a local speaker and author, and also a certified Dare to Lead coach. And if you're not familiar with Dare to Lead, Brene Brown is the author of that entire philosophy and program. And the local coach that I work with, her name is Justine Faulkner. She is fabulous. And one of the things that she consistently says is clear is kind. I think oftentimes when we are trying to give feedback, we go about it so delicately and so softly that at the end of it, everyone's like, wait, what are we talking about? Like, we're not being kind because we're not being clear. And so all of these things become the problems that are wrapped up with feedback. With feed forward, and what I love most are the questions that are up on the screen here. What we're really doing is we're looking at expansion. We're looking at growing on the good things that we've already seen, that we've already noticed. We're asking people to dig deep into themselves and look for more answers and take on more responsibility and to be more accountable. I think all of us would raise our hands if every video camera was on and I said, would you agree that in this country and in this world, and especially in the professional workplace, accountability is a problem? Like, it is a problem because we want to be kind, but it's hard to balance empathy with accountability. And sometimes that is such a tricky balance to strike. Now, again, this isn't a whole presentation on empathy and accountability, but I will say it is possible to be both. And while I can't give you all of the tips and tricks on how to balance those two, I will say this. The only way to actually create accountability is through empathy and not through shame, not through blame, not through criticism or finding fault, but to say, I believe in you. I am on your side. And I want you to know that these are the things that I see that are either holding you back or could propel you forward. And given in that light and not from a, well, let me just give you some feedback on the things that I'm noticing that we don't like, it can be a world of difference. So really being true, being authentic, being an ally to the person that you are supporting and wanting to coach, mentor, and grow is not only a great and positive way that says, hey, we're in this together. I myself have issues. Tell me how I can be a better leader. What kind of role model is that? Like the best, right? Tell me what I can do differently. Think about what peer accountability looks like. Instead of it always having to come from the boss, like how do we hold one another accountable? A really good technique is to have like rules of engagement or, really norms that we set out that say, this is how we're going to address things when they come up. For example, a typical thing that I've seen happen with Toastmasters time and again is when you don't necessarily have people proactively signing up for roles, right? And then either the VPE or the Toastmaster has to go and say, hey guys, we don't have anyone signed up. And then they try to reach out to people. So that's an accountability issue. We are all here at this club for a purpose. Or at this organization, my apologies. We're at this organization for a purpose. We want to grow. We want to get better. And part of growing ourselves and becoming the leaders we were meant to be is by being accountable. So if we're not taking on a role, if we're not holding ourselves accountable and saying, at the end of the meeting, okay, guys, these are the open roles, who's taking what? Like, let's just get this done. That is a game changer where we're holding one another accountable instead of sort of always leaving one person holding the bag. So I highly encourage and invite you to read this book, The Feedback Fix. Certainly Joe does a far better job of honoring the message than I can. But I think that this is a read that is really worth your time. Let's talk about mentorship. This is actually kind of a passion project of mine. I'm working with a client right now. Actually, I'm working with 2 clients right now, and we are getting ready to implement mentoring programs into their workplace. So the big picture that we need to keep in mind with mentorship is it can look like a lot of different things. But the quote that's up on the screen is the thing that we always have to keep forward in our minds, which is the key to being a good mentor is to help people become more of who they already are and not to make them more like you. Keep in mind, like, what does it look like if you have someone that is not comfortable with conflict or direct conversation? And so they're constantly mentoring and coaching, like, don't be too direct, soften that message. Now, I will say there is a time and a place to have a softer, more gentle message, especially if I'm in communication with someone who is soft and gentle and might feel like a little uncomfortable with a direct approach. I'd be the first one to modify my tone and my style in order to make that person I'm working with feel more comfortable for their own, just for their own comfort level. The problem is that sometimes we can mistakenly believe that our way is the only way. Our way is the right way. There are so many right ways that are out there. A great mentor will look at the unique talents and abilities of that individual, and they will notice them being amazing, and they will bring it forward, and they will call it out, and they will do this because this is free. It costs us nothing, whether publicly or privately, both are important. So let's talk a little bit about the 3 things that we want to be doing as mentors. Number 1, we need to exemplify the behavior of the mentor, the leader that we are working with that mentee on. So be the person, role model the behavior, be thoughtful, be appreciative, be authentic. Be apologetic if you have something to apologize for. It is okay to be human and embrace our human imperfections. Advocate for that person. Don't just keep their awesomeness between you and that person. Let the world know what they're good at. Share their talents, share their abilities. Really look for opportunities for them to stretch and grow. Introduce them to people that can be powerful in their career and their growth. Like, don't be shy and don't be stingy with that information. And finally, be a coach. Like, recognize the difference between a leader who sometimes sort of has to be the person to say, this will not stand, or take corrective action. A coach should always be there to guide, to encourage, to inspire, to help provide the little tips and techniques that you can do to change things. One of my daughters is a competitive volleyball player, which I love. My husband and I both do spend a whole lot of time in the gym, away at tournaments, and doing a lot of like clapping and supporting. And she's our youngest. So, hey, we have no life. Like, we get to just basically be her biggest fans. And I love that. But we've had a lot of years to notice different coaching styles. And this past year was hands down the most powerful coaching that I'd ever witnessed on the court, at least with this kid. Now, I've got a lot of kids, and she's the only one who's an athlete. So maybe I'm crazy and maybe my vision is limited, but boy, I'll tell you, I was really a fan. Here's what it looked like. At practice, they were constantly focused on improvement. Yeah, there was some yelling, like, come on, girls, pick up the speed, lift up the knees. We got to, dive for the ball. We got to do more. So that there was, the intensity that you would expect to drive and propel that behavior. But the thing that really impressed me was on the court. Here's what didn't happen. When we were down points, as a girl would come off the court, one of the coaching staff would pull them aside and sort of talk about, like, okay, so when this situation is happening, you might want to step back. Like, be sure to get down and low and in front of the ball, soften your shoulders. It wasn't, what are you doing out there? I mean, I literally watched coaches pull young girls, and I mean, we're talking as young as 10, 11, aside and be cussing and screaming, like, get off your what are you doing? And you know what happens? All of the girls, like, this is what happens. And it is a terrible thing to watch. And as a parent, you are told up front, parents are not invited to speak to the coaches. So you feel fair. You have one of 2 choices. You either kind of like talk to your kid about, yeah, you got good coaches and bad coaches, and that's kind of life, or you pull your kid out of a sport that they love. So when we've had coaches that I have not appreciated, I have tried to coach my own daughter and how to, rise above bad behavior and strengthen who she is, and take the lessons that being on a team sport and, having a passion for what she loves, even if there are times when there are people that don't make her love the sport, what that looks like. So trust me when I share that this new coaching that we had this last year was some of the best that I've seen. When we were down points, I saw us come back, and actually they're a pretty good team, so take this with a grain of salt. I saw us come back from an 11-point down to win. 11 points down. Psychologically, can you imagine? You only played at 25. Can you imagine being 11 points down and not giving up? That's what this coaching did. Because it's not always about what we're doing right. Sometimes it's about how we pick ourselves up and pick one another up and lift each other up and encourage ourselves to go on. Invest in them. Like, keep in mind that superstars are amazing. And I love them just like you do. There's nothing better than having a Dawn Tucker on the team where you're like, oh my God, I love it. Dawn's just gonna make this all happen. She's gonna pull together this leadership expo and she's just on it, and that's phenomenal. But one of the things that I've seen Toastmasters do, and I think do really well, is they reach into new talent that is still fledgling and still sort of learning and getting the ropes and maybe not as confident or sure of themselves. And they're like, we're gonna put you in. We're gonna put you in, we're gonna invest in you. We're gonna let that time and that trajectory play out. Kelly Lawson, who I spoke about earlier, I've got some firsthand knowledge about Kelly. Let me tell you, Kelly is an amazing foundational part, not only of our club, not only has she shown up today, she's at every speech contest, she has fulfilled roles, and she is now going to be our area manager. So she's new talent. She is amazing talent, but she was talent that at the beginning of this was like, wait, what are we talking about? What do you want me to do? I'm not sure. And so Kelly does a very smart job of knowing what her boundaries are, but also not being afraid of taking risk. So we've talked a lot about leadership, but also, just like was shared earlier, when someone asks, like, be the person to say yes. Be that person that steps up and steps forward. Know that you can invest time in yourself. You can get the training, the support, the resources that you need. Deborah attended training that she's going to give us the down low on. We're always like growing. Learning is a lifetime journey. It's not a destination. So be okay allowing yourself the time you need in order to grow and expand. Don't be afraid to work those muscles and expand and grow them. Also, be willing to share your wisdom. I was so excited when I heard earlier, people needed my voice, and so I spoke. You would be surprised at how important your knowledge is. Yeah, I see this a lot with people who are very good at their job, right? Experts. They think that their expertise, by and large, they think their expertise is just normal. I'm like, no, that is not normal. You're amazing. You need to share that. But they don't really acknowledge the fact that over time they've developed those skills and they are so knowledgeable. It's as natural to them as breathing. And it never occurs to them like, oh, you know what? I do know a lot about this or that or the other. It's incredible to me to witness when people have knowledge that they share, how the light bulbs just over people's heads just start to glow. It's incredible, but I think too often we hold back on our knowledge thinking it's not important, it's not valuable, or it's not really needed. So one of my superpowers is empathy. Believe me, this is related to what we're talking about. So a big topic that I have trained on for years is empathy. And I can tell you that early on in my career, I was very buttoned up, very Kevlar, very serious, very professional, and vulnerability was not a part of my vocabulary. Well, vulnerability and empathy go hand in hand, because in order to have empathy, you sort of have to acknowledge your weaknesses and you have to be okay with that. And you also have to look at other people's vulnerabilities and not judge them and not feel like there's something wrong because they're not perfect. And so I spent a lot of years apologizing for the fact that I was too soft, too touchy-feely. And then when I stopped apologizing for that, and I really started to embrace that empathy was my superpower, like there was an avalanche of activity that happened. But the biggest turning point for me was not only the internal journey I was going on, but when I had a gentleman come up to me one time during a break at a training session I was conducting, and he said, "I need your help. I don't know how to be empathetic, and I want to be. And my whole life I've been told that that's not what I should be, but I realize it is the biggest thing that I'm missing. It's the thing that holds me back from being the leader I want to be, from being the husband I want to be, from being the man I want to be." I have had many people come up to me and share profound things that just blow my mind. But that was one of the early and most powerful memories that I have that I will never forget. That was a clear signal to me that empathy, number one, has a place in business. And number two, if it's my superpower, I have an obligation to share that. And I should not be stingy, and I should not be selfish. I should share that. Our last point of today's session, I want to talk about asking questions, right? I think too often we look around the room and we pre-decide and predefine roles for people. I can remember early on, I was working my way through college. I was a single mom. I was in an administrative position, and I knew I wanted more. But I was constantly told, like, you're really good at your job. Like, you're really good in this administrative role. You should continue to do that. And I'm like, well, it's not that there's anything wrong with that, but I want more. Like, I want more for myself. But I'll be honest, the deck was kind of stacked against me. I was working my way through college. I was a single mom. I was trying to balance things. And I was just so young. I didn't really know, but there was something at the heart of me that says there has to be more. But the world around me would just look at the role that I had and look at my life situation, and they would say, you're well suited for that. Just keep doing that. They didn't look at me and see potential. They looked at me and they said, okay, I know your limits. I know who you are. And I think that, you're really good at what you're doing. So you're well situated. And I will say that my entire career, and this may sound arrogant, but I have believed in myself more than anyone else has believed in me. And I have a lot of amazing people that believe in me. I have an incredible team behind me. And by that, I don't mean like a team that reports me. I mean, I have an incredible team behind me. But we always have to sort of break through our own stereotypes, our own limitations, our own way of looking at ourselves. And so we have to advocate for ourselves. And I would invite you, when you look around the room, don't limit other people's potential. Don't put a cap on it and think, well, they're really good at that, so that must be all they're good at. There is so much more that we can do. It may be uncomfortable. It may be stretching. It may be like, there's a little bit of a $250,000 investment that may go down in flames. We have to be comfortable thinking outside of our own perspective. Be willing to ask questions. One of the key things that I do with any client that I work with any person that I'm coaching, with anyone that is just meeting with me to talk about their future and their career, I ask questions. What do you want? What does success look like for you? What are your interests? What do you love? True story. I have a sister-in-law who is an oncologist who absolutely hates her job, hates it. She loves cats. She would have been a great vet, but instead she kind of found herself in this career, and she sort of saw her path and what she had to be, and she didn't even ask herself, what should it be? So when I have up here on the screen, know your limits, I don't mean know your limits. I mean, know that you might be going through life with blinders on for yourself, with blinders on for others. Know when you are putting boundaries that don't belong. Know when you can stretch and grow and encourage others to stretch and grow. Be open. Ask people, what do you like? What do you love? What do you want? Support that. Don't grow them into an image of yourself. Grow them into the best version of themselves. Encourage that. Ask. Be open to the answers. Don't assume that you know. I'll leave you with one of the most inspiring stories from Toastmasters that I have. And let me tell you, it is a long list, but I'm just going to share one. My first club that I belonged to was River City Toastmasters. Amazing. They were transformational to me. And I'm comfortable with public speaking. I really joined Toastmasters so I could learn how to take a 12-hour message and condense it into 5 minutes and still have it be impactful. So my goals were very different. But there was a gentleman who joined Toastmasters, and I'll never forget the very first time he was called to the front of the room, and really all he needed to do was say his name. And he could not even say that. Like the fear that gripped his throat, the verbal paralysis, the stuttering to try to even say his name took, I would say, at least 1 minute. But the most powerful thing is he indeed did say his name, and he didn't give up, and he took that minute. And at the end of it, every one of us had goosebumps. Every one of us were like applauding. And a year later, that same gentleman was standing at the front of the room giving speeches, and you never, ever would have associated him with the first day of Toastmasters. This organization is transformational. You as leaders in this organization are transformational. And what you give to others makes a difference. So on behalf of all of us who have benefited from this organization, I just thank you. I thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I thank you for the great questions, for the great feedback, for everything that you've given so generously now and through the years. And just want to encourage you to continue to strive to not only be those amazing leaders that you are, but grow, nurture, and nourish the leaders all around us. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Dawn, for inviting me today and giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Nancy. That was fabulous. It was a presentation that was very informative, very engaging, and also very uplifting. I don't know about you, but I got goosebumps during this session. I learned so much, and it was a huge encouragement to me to be better at helping others become leaders. So, Nancy, I can't thank you enough. It was a beautiful job, not just a good presentation, but a beautiful job all the way around. Thank you so much for ending our week on a high, a definite high note. And I look
That's
awesome.
My pleasure. So I'm so honored to have been asked today. Thank you so much to all of you.
I can't wait to hear the next thing you come up with. This was terrific.
Nancy, I knew your mom, Kathy, from Toastmasters, and I'm sure she is very proud of your journey through Toastmasters and at Moneta. So great job. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you, John. So such a treat every time I see you. Thank you so much. John, our first mentor for Moneta Voices.
Hi, Nancy.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. This is Kelly Bottini. I don't know if you remember me, but you were a mentor and a leader and had a profound impact on my future. I think when we met in probably 2014 at SLU.
Yes,
and
Kelly.
I helped you with the Fortitude, the Women's Fortitude Conference.
Yes.
I still have a recipe from that. And just, I got this message from, I was a South County Toastmaster, and I think Debbie Young is on the call. And I think Debbie and I never met in person, but I tried to recruit her for something else. And she was then getting into Toastmasters full time with South County Toastmasters. But when I saw your name, I was just like, that's her. That's her. And it's just so good to see you. You look exactly the same. You're just effervescent as always, and just a great message. And you know, I just love seeing you and hearing you again. So
Oh my
thank you.
Kelly, I love seeing you. Girl, we got to connect. Like what? Yeah. Invite me to your Toastmaster club. I'm going to come to it. Say hello.
South County Toastmasters.
On it.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kelly. How fabulous to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful holiday weekend. I wore red and white for the occasion. So God bless America.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
God bless. Blessings, everyone.